Preven, can you hear me?
Can you hear you now, Charles?
Good.
Loud and clear.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think let's start. Is that fine?
Yes, we have 49 participants on the platform at the moment.
Now 50. Perfect. Good.
Yes.
Good morning, colleagues. Ninjani, Abari, Muliwanji. Thank you very much for joining this session. My name is Charles Chikunda. I'm reaching to you from UNESCO Regional Office of Southern Africa in Harare. Today's session is very important to us. As you know, the change project model is the methodology that we use for the SST program. We believe in transforming our institutions towards sustainability. So we need to make sure that the work that we are doing is leading to or is contributing to sustainable transformation in our curricula, in our assessment, in our institutions, in our environments, and everything else. Now, whenever you embark on a transformative journey, you need tools to help you to always assist in terms of making sure that you are still walking the path of that transformative journey, evaluating whether you are really making an impact and scaling up or reaching out to more people. So the title of the webinar today is Finding Value, Monitoring and Evaluation using the Value Creation Framework towards scaling for impact. And to help us to do that, to go through this webinar, we've got very distinguished professionals from our region. I'm deliberately saying from our region because Martin is also almost from this region. I think, Martin, you'll agree with me that your second home is Southern Africa. So we have got, I think you all know them. Sirka is from Namibia. She has been quiet, but we have to bring her out. She was hiding in the desert. From University of Namibia. Martin is from Uppsala University in Sweden, and our very own distinguished professor, Hela, from Rhodes University. They'll take us through what it means to find value in your transformative work that you are embarking on. Now, without wasting much of your time, let me hand over to, I don't know the order in which they'll be speaking, but I'm quickly going to hand over to Hela to start the discussion. Hela, please take it away.
Thank you very much, Charles. And I have a very simple job to start the discussion, which is to pass the baton over to Sirka and to Martin. They're going to lead the discussion. As you know, we've been working in the SST course with a monitoring and evaluation tool, which we call the Value Creation Framework. And the purpose of that is to create a tool that we can all use to look at our own practice and try to identify what kind of value is being created for us through the change projects and through our participation on the course. And of course, not only for us, but also for our communities and for the education systems in our country. So we are encouraging all participants to fill in, we call them to fill in the value creation framework forms. Sirka will tell you more about that. She'll also explain the evaluation tool. And then the reason why we want to do that is because we want to identify that what is most valuable, or what is becoming very valuable to us in the context, because that is often what is most useful for us to scale and extend and share with others. So that's what our session is this morning. So I'm going to hand over to Sirka and to Martin. Martin is from Uppsala University. He is visiting us here now as in the postdoctoral position. But when I first met Martin, he was doing his PhD research on scaling, and he came to Southern Africa and helped us to review the many years of training practice that we've been involved in order to think about that as a sort of scaling process across the SADC region. So we're very happy to have Martin here from Sweden. And of course, Sirka is very well known in our community, and she's now at the University of Namibia. So Sirka, I'm going to hand over to you, and then you and Martin can take us forward, and I'll join you again towards the end of the session. Over to you, Sirka.
Okay, thank you, Hayla, and good afternoon. Not good afternoon, it's still morning here. Good morning, everyone. I hope you can all hear me. Please, if you cannot, do let me know before I start. Charles, can you hear me?
Yes, yes, loud and clear.
Okay, great. And I have just started sharing my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes, maybe you can put in the presentation mode.
Is it not in the presentation mode?
Now, yes.
On my side.
Yes.
Okay, great. So good morning, everyone. It's nice to be here and to be part of this session. And as Hayla and Charles said already, we are going to be focusing on evaluation and scaling. And the title of my presentation is titled Evaluating the Change Project for Value Creation. And what I'm really going to do in this presentation is I'm going to focus on 4 things. The first thing that I'm going to look at is just to highlight some of the evaluation questions that we try to answer as part of the CAP EST project or program, which is actually what we are expecting you as our participants to be able to answer as well. Obviously not at the end of the course, but also during the process of the course, because we say this is ongoing work. So we want to, I want to highlight some of the evaluation questions that we answer as part of this program. And then secondly, as Hayla said, I'm going to touch on the value creation framework, which is actually the framework that we use for our evaluation work to be able to identify the different types of values that have been created during the different processes that we have undertaken as part of this program. Because we know now we have different processes. We have the online course, we have the webinars, and then we have the actual change project. And all these different processes do provide different kinds of value. So we are going to look at the value creation framework, which will help us to be able to identify the different types of values that are created in these different processes. And then thirdly, what I will then do is just share some of the examples from our 2019 work so that we can see what value creation was created by some of the projects that were initiated in 2019, particularly from the countries that were participating in 2019, and those were Botswana, Namibia, and Zimbabwe. So I'll probably just share 1 or 2 because of time factors. But of course, if you need more examples, we can always share that with you through other platforms. And then the last thing that I'm going to then do is just to give you a little activity to help you start reflecting on your own journey, because like I said, you have already been part of the course, of the online course, you have already been part of the webinars, and I'm sure you have already started conceptualizing your change project and your change project ideas. So I will then just want to hear from you in the form of a little activity, what kinds of values are starting to emerge from those different processes that you have been part of. And then after that, I will hand over to Martin, who is then going to take you into the scaling concept. So in terms of our evaluation work, the key questions that we really ask are the following. Like we say, the first thing that we want to know is to understand which aspects of the program were most valuable to you. And of course, also to understand why you think those were the most valuable aspects. We also want to understand what new insights did you gain from the program. And then, of course, also understand what information or materials were most helpful, because we have provided you with so many different materials, and we hope that you have been working through these different materials. So we want to understand which of this information and materials were most helpful so that it can help us in the future as we review and develop further materials for other programs. And we also want to understand what have you been able to apply to your change project, because ultimately all these sessions are actually structured in such a way that you are able to reflect back on your change project and also implement some of the aspects from these different sessions into your change projects. So we want to hear what have you been able to apply to your change project. And then we also want to hear what difference has this program made to your performance at this point, if any, because like I said, this is ongoing work. You have already been working on the online course. You had different webinars before, and you have started working on your change project. So we just want to know what difference has this program so far made on your performance, if any, because the idea really is for the program to be able to transform for example, your teaching practices, amongst others. So we want to know if there were any changes or any performances that were changed as a result of you being part of this program. And then the other thing that we want to know is, how is this contributing to the goal of your institution? I remember very well that in the first session, when you started talking about your change project and starting to contextualize your change project, you also had to go back to your different institutions and try to do some scoping work to see what's happening in your institution, what are the visions and missions and goals of the institutions, and how can your potential change project contribute to the achievement of the goal of your institution. So we will want to hear if at all your change project and change project ideas have actually started contributing to the achievement of the goal of your institution, because the change project is not happening in isolation of the institution. The idea is to be able to contribute to the achievement of the institutional mandates and also the goal of your institution at large. And then lastly, we want to know if there have been any changes in terms of your own or some other stakeholders' understandings of what matters in terms of teacher and TVET education, or more broadly, because obviously we have different participants in the program, and we know that the different participants are also working with different stakeholders who are part of their communities of practice. We would very much like to know if their program have in any way change your own practices as a teacher educator or TVET educator, but at the same time, if it have also contributed to the understanding of other stakeholders, particularly the stakeholders in your community of practice. So these are some of the evaluation questions that we really are interested in to help us understand and inform the value that the program have contributed to you, your practices, your stakeholders, as well as the institution at large. So as I said earlier, the next thing that I'm going to look at then is to just introduce you to the value creation framework. This is the work of Wenger, Trainer, and Delat, which was written in 2011. And if you go back to your learning action areas that you were given, I'm sure probably at the beginning of the course, there is learning action area 5. And if you go to that learning action area 5, page 14 and 15, it's actually introducing you to this value creation framework. So I'm just going to go through with you so that you have an understanding of what this framework is all about, and then look at some practical examples so that you can also see how to use it in your own work. But the idea is for you to understand how you are going to complete your evaluations, which are actually created and based on this value creation framework. So there are 5 types of values that we actually look for in the different work that we have been doing. Like I said, whether it's in the course online, whether it's in the change project itself, whether it's in the webinars, whether it's in any other engagements that you have been doing as part of this program. And these 5 different values that we look at are the immediate value, the potential value, the applied value, the realized value, and then the reframing value. And you will see that at this point in time, it might happen that, for example, you have maybe only achieved at least 1 or 2 of these values, but not to say that you have not done much. It simply means that because with the ongoing work that you are still going to do, you might then be able to pick up on the other values, because some values can only be achieved once you have implemented, for example, your change project. And it might be that at this point in time, most of you or all of you have probably still not started implementing your change project. But once you have done that, then you'll be able to identify further value, which might not have been created yet from the work that has been done thus far. So the first type of value that we talk about then, or according to Wenger and Trainer's work, is the immediate value. And as the word says, immediate value, this is the type of value that is immediately achieved by being part of the project. For example, when you have been in this program this far, you have already achieved certain things, or you're already able to say you have learned certain things. And these things that you're able to learn immediately, this makes part of immediate value. And examples of such values could be things like, for example, if you have gained new knowledge, or maybe you're able to form new partnerships or new networks, even with people within your community of practice, or maybe with people in the broader SST program, or maybe even just to be able to to form new partnerships and networks within your college or within your TVET institution. So that qualifies to be part of the immediate value that you have gained by engaging in the EST course this far. Or like I said, as maybe part of you starting to conceptualize your EST change project. But it can also be about you gaining new knowledge, because we know that in the second, third, and fourth learning action areas, we focus pretty much on the SDGs, the content in the curriculums, the assessment strategies, and the different pedagogical approaches that we can use to be able to transform our teaching and learning. So if you are able to grasp new content or new strategies or new assessment ways of doing things, that is part of immediate value, because it's something that you were immediately able to achieve by being part of the course or by starting to conceptualize your EST change project. So that is what immediate value is all about. And then the next value that can also be created in the process is potential value. And with potential value, what this means really is to say that as much as, yes, there is value that can be created immediately, there is some value that is not produced or that is not realized immediately, but it can be realized at a later stage. And that realization at a later stage means there is potential for you to be able to achieve that value at a later stage. And that's why we call it potential. So it can be that as you have now been part of this process, you have again been able to identify certain things that you know that you can potentially implement later in your practices, or you can potentially realize later as the change project progresses or as the change project gets implemented. And those examples can be, for example, things like related to personal assets. It can be further relationships and connections, because it can be that, yes, you have achieved certain connections by being part of the project, but you are again seeing potential connections that you can do as you implement your project. So the fact that you are able to anticipate those potential connections, that becomes part of potential value. But it can also be things like resources or intangible assets, as well as the transformed ability to learn, because it can be also that out of this process, you are now seeing future potentials to learn about other aspects of EST that you might not necessarily have learned in this program. So it's about potential. What else are you seeing as potential out of this work that you've been doing thus far, for example? So that is what potential value is all about. And then the third type of value is the applied value. And as the word implies, applied means what you have applied in terms of the knowledge that you have, for example, gained from here, in terms of your actions, in terms of your practices, in terms of your institutional systems. Because like I said, there are certain things that you might have already been able to take back to your own institutions. There might have been knowledge that you've already taken back to your own teaching or your own practices. And that in itself then becomes applied value, because it means it's something that you are able to apply to be able to change your practices. But again, like I said, it can be new knowledge, it can be new actions, it can be new tools that you got maybe from your program and you just wanted to go and use it in your own teaching, or just new approaches. Like I said, maybe you were just able to go back and change the way you teach EST. Now you are using more transformative approaches. Now you are using the significant other assessment framework, because you have been taught that as part of the course. So if you were able to do that, then it means there is already some evidence of applied value that is actually coming out of your work because of the application that you were able to do as a result of the learning that you have done thus far. But of course, again, it can also be just things that you can have broadly go and introduce in your broader institution, because again, it will depend on the nature of your work and the nature of your change project, because we know that some people work with whole institution kinds of change projects. So your application or your applied value might have been done at an institutional level and not necessarily just in your own individual practice. And then the fourth type of value is the realized value. And the realized value really builds on applied value. And again, this has to do with you being able to improve your performance or being able to change your practice as a result of what you have applied. Because we know that sometimes, yes, you may apply something, but it's not that it's going to change the practice. But if you are able to then see the change and the transformation and the improvement in terms of what you have been doing, then you can then say there is also evidence of realized value as a result of you being able to apply what you have learned and gained on the program. And then the last one is the reframing value. And the reframing value is actually created when social learning in a community of practice leads to a consideration of the learning imperative. And as the word reframing means, it means that here it includes you reframing your strategies or reframing the goals or reframing, again, your practices in your institution, for example. And this reframing value can happen at an individual level, but it can also happen at a collective level, but of course also at an organizational level. And this is not only to say it's only the reframing value that can happen at these different levels, because you have seen that even with the realized and the applied, they can also happen at different levels depending on how you decide to go and apply what you have learned from the course and also from the change project processes. So these are the 5 types of values that we have been working with when we evaluate the change projects and when we also evaluate the growth of our different participants on the program. And that is also the framework that we will want to share with you in the form of the evaluation form, so that we can also learn what you were able to learn or what kinds of values were created from your own work. That's why we had to introduce it to you. But of course, like I said, if it's not clear, you can still go back to your learning action area, learning action 5 on page 14 and 15, and then you can further familiarize yourself with these different values that are created through the value creation framework. So in terms of the practicality or in terms of application, like I said, I'm then just sharing these 2 examples from the 2019 participants who were then able to use this value creation to be able to analyze the value that was created in their own change projects. So the first example that I will share is then from one of my colleagues here who have been working with the community to be able to come up with a project that is looking at natural resources management in mitigating animal and human conflict through cultural practices. So one of the things, or one of the sustainability challenges that we have been experiencing as a country, particularly in the eastern part of the country, is animal and human conflicts. So one of the things that the colleague then wanted to do here, because she is teaching in the campus that is in that area she is teaching in the university campus, which is in the eastern part of the country, which is close to the national park where the animal and human conflicts are an issue. She decided that with their colleagues, they are going to walk through the natural science curriculum and see how they are going to use that curriculum to be able to be able to address the issue of natural resource management, mitigating animal and human conflicts through cultural practices. So how they have gone about that, obviously, is by forming a community of practice, just like you're expected to do. And then they started analyzing the natural science primary school curriculum. And then they started identifying potential areas where they needed to integrate these aspects. But of course, because it's a community issue, they also needed to work with schools that are in that community, as well as the Ministry of Education and Ministry of Environment, among other stakeholders, to be able to address these issues of animal and human wildlife, animal and human conflicts. And in terms of their evaluation, they were then able to identify the different types of values that were created as part of this process. So for example, in terms of the immediate value, they were able to say that as part of that process, they formed a learning network that goes beyond the immediate university walls, because now they were working with communities, they were working with schools in the national park, and they were working with other key stakeholders. So because of that, they were then able to come up with a learning network that goes beyond the university walls. And then they were also able to share information with schools to improve practices such as, for example, reducing littering, using of water sparingly, and also to reduce their ecological footprint. And then in terms of potential value, they were able to For example, this particular colleague who was completing the evaluation said, my teaching now gives emphasis on the topics that address nexus of environmental protection and human well-being. She further said that the change project has changed and improved the community of practice, teachers and student teachers' understanding of the 21st century skills, because one of the things that we emphasize on the project is also being able to promote the 21st century skills. So she was able to see that as potential value in her change project. And in terms of application, she said that she had some activities with students on the 21st century skills, and she also encouraged students to choose ESD-related topics for their problem-based learning projects, and to also integrate it in their lessons during the school-based studies. School-based studies is when the students go for teaching practice. So they were also encouraged to integrate ESD when they go for teaching practice, as well as when they do their problem-based learning projects. And in terms of realized value, she noticed that the program makes a difference in her performance because she was now able to integrate all the 17 SDGs in her teaching. And of course, again, 17 SDGs is one of the things that we emphasize on the program. So she was able to take that and go and apply it in her own teaching. So that have resulted in some sort of realized value. And then lastly, in terms of reframed value, she said that yes, they were able to establish a small working group in different departments, and people have now a much deeper and broader understanding of ESD. And firstly, ESD was viewed as a social study related topic, which I'm sure a lot of you can relate to, that in different universities and institutions, ESD is affiliated with certain topics, especially the social sciences topics or social science subjects. But after she introduced the change project, her colleagues were now able to see that ESD actually goes beyond just the social study related topics, and people were able to appreciate it more and have started to integrate it in their different subjects. So there is still a need to be strengthened. I mean, there's still a need, she said that there's still a need to strengthen this area, especially because some colleagues were not part of the process. So she sees value or further potential value in strengthening the integration of ESD amongst other colleagues in other subjects. But she further says that best is that they are now all aware of ESD and SDGs, and it have also improved relationships as they are now able to share the same goal and operate as a more dynamic team. And again, as one of the purposes, or rather one of the purpose of this project is really just to be able to do exactly this, to be able to form relationships within the different institutions, and also to see how best different colleagues can work together. So it's very nice to hear from a colleague who is then saying here that they are now able to share the same goal and are able to operate as a more dynamic team. So this was just one example from a colleague. I don't know how much time I still have, Charles. Should I still go to the next example, or?
Hela, how much time have we given to Silka? She can go for the whole day anyway.
How much more time do you need?
No, I just want to give another example, and then I can give them the reflection exercise. So it's only probably 5 more minutes.
Okay.
I think that's good.
Okay, great. So the next example then, especially for the colleagues who are in TVET, because I know that one of the things that we were also able to identify before the beginning of this project, or the implementation of this project, is that TVET colleagues have been feeling left out in terms of ESD and ESD activities. But since we have now started involving the TVET educators in the project, they have now also started sharing some of the values that have been created in their own institutions as a result of them participating on the project. So this example here is coming from an institution in Zimbabwe, Harare Institute of Technology, and I particularly just chose this change project because of the TVET focus, so that I can show the TVET colleagues that, of course, we have also seen a lot of values that have been created in the TVET sector as a result of the SST program. So these colleagues have set up a departmental community of practice that integrates ESD principles in the course outlines and make it part of what is assessed in the coursework as well as in the examinations. So they have organized staff development workshops to enlighten their colleagues from other departments and also from other sister institutions on integrating ESD in the TVET curriculum. So this is almost similar to the previous one, but here focusing more on TVET, and the previous one was focusing more particularly on human-wildlife conflicts, but this one was more interested in looking at how they can integrate the ESD principles in the TVET curriculum. So what the colleagues in Zimbabwe then were able to identify as the different values that were created in this process is that for immediate value, they have revitalized the college community collaboration in curriculum and inter-institutional partnership on curriculum transformation. So that was quite big. And in terms of potential value, there were new perspectives on engineering and TVET curriculum, and there was also a shared understanding of SDGs and ESD and developed sense of companionship across the different departments at the TVET institutions, moving from engineering as unusual to ESD in engineering education. So they have established a learning network in the institution and with other institutions with potential to enable further learning and communication. And in terms of application, they were able to integrate ESD courses, or they were able to integrate ESD in the different course outlines, which is now widely being used in different departments. And they also have done visible attempts by educators to move from teaching engineering as unusual to ESD in engineering education. And in terms of realized value, the Change Project have raised awareness on the importance of including sustainable development in their curriculum. And it have also helped in the quality of the projects that are done by students, as most lecturers are now aware of the importance of achieving the SDGs by year 2030. So the projects are now more focused on addressing the SDGs. And then lastly, in terms of reframing value, they have now reconsideration of what is taught and assessed in engineering, including designing and implementing strategies to integrate sustainability in engineering courses, as well as assessing sustainability knowledge. So again, I just thought this one was a nice one to share, because we always had colleagues who would say, no, engineering is too natural science, we cannot integrate ESD, or engineering is too quantitative and we cannot integrate ESD. But these colleagues from the Harare Institute of Technology have actually shown through this evidence that they were able to transform not just their curriculum by integrating ESD, but also their assessment practices, so that they were now able to assess the aspects that are related to ESD within the engineering curriculum. And now they are moving away from what they call engineering as unusual to ESD in engineering education. So this is the second example. But like I said, in the interest of time, I'm not going to give more examples, because I think you have an idea and you can see how we have been using the value creation framework to be able to identify the different values that have been created through our different change projects or change project processes. But there is an example on the PowerPoint from Botswana as well, so you can also look at that. And this is more of a community engagement kind of project. So you can see how the Botswana colleagues from Molepe College have gone about it, and also see what kinds of values were created in the project, as well as an example from an ESD department in Zimbabwe, again from Seke Teachers College, where the colleagues again were just talking about how they were able to use a change project to transform the teachers and student teachers' ways of producing instructional media technology and toys by specifically using locally available material, because we know that the teachers and student teachers are constantly complaining of not being able to afford to buy teaching aids. So here, the Zimbabwean colleagues were trying to then, through their ESD change project, being able to come up with ways of using locally available materials to produce instructional media technology and toys for ECD. So that's also a good example to look at. And then, as I said, lastly, I then just want you to spend maybe 2 minutes to just reflect on your own journey this far, to be able to say, can you identify any value that have been created from you being part of the online course, by the process of conceptualizing your change project, and also through the course webinars that you have been attending, because we say that different values can be achieved at different points. So the activity here says that based on your online course, conceptualization of your change project, and course webinars, using the value creation cycle, explain what value you have been able to create and how you have been able to do this using these categories of value creation. And as I said earlier, please note that further value can still be created from the EST change project in the future. So if there are some values that you cannot identify with at the moment, do not get worried, because as the project progresses, you also pick up on new values. So I just thought, as a teacher, I need to give an activity, and you can just use 2 minutes to reflect on that before I give over to Martin. So we can come back to this if there is still a few minutes before the session is over. Otherwise, thank you, and we look forward to seeing the outcomes of your change projects. Charles, I'm ending here, and I'm giving over to Martin. So Martin, please take over.
Thank you, Sirka. I will give maybe 1 minute just so you can finish the little reflective assignment Sirka gave you. So I'll just give you a few seconds more to think through. Then I'll come back and give you some input. Okay, I think we should move forward. So if I could take over the screen sharing from you, Sirka. Thank you. Okay, perfect. Does everyone hear me well and see my screen? Yes.
Yes, we've got you. Thanks, Martin.
Yep, that sounds good. Okay, good morning, everyone, from Malawi, from Tanzania, and Eswatini. As Charles mentioned, I'm happy to be back in my second home here in Southern Africa. And as Hale also mentioned, I've been here before during my PhD, and I'm happy to be here again now that I'm doing my postdoc for the coming 3 years in the region. So if we're gonna pick up on what Sirka was talking about today, talking about the value. So what I'm going to take you forward into is really the question about finding value for scaling for impact. So Sirka talked about, for example, immediate value, potential value, applied value, realized value, and reframing value. But I think to this, if you look through also the documentation of the SST course, there is also mentions of strategic and enabling value, and that could be, if you think about taking it forward. You've done something in your project, but how do we take it forward? Because a perpetual challenge often of many of these projects, the project culture that many of us live in, is that we do projects and then they end. So how do we take them forward? And that is at the core of scaling. So how do we make it possible for others to do what you have been doing and continuously are doing? And the second part is also the transformative value of your change project. What effects is in the wider environment in positive ways? So these two things are commonly referred to as scaling within the program. So it's really taking these values that you already created and taking them further. That's the core of the scaling work. So moving forward, then, if we're beginning to think about monitoring, evaluation, and scaling for impact of your change project, just scaling then describes the progress and strength of your change project and its potential to be replicated or expanded within your institutions, but or your departments or your TVET colleges, but also across maybe your other department and other institutions, and also beyond. So there is a crucial part that we will come back to throughout my short presentation here, is this, that it's crucial to also think about not just what you want to scale or take forward, but also with whom and where. So its potential of being extended, and it might be different at different times. So how then to identify those elements of the change project that are worth scaling? Because just because you might be able to doesn't make it necessarily that you should, or is it worth it? Coming back to the idea of value. And that connects also to the idea that you've so far focused a lot on value for your own practice, maybe the practice of your colleague or close colleagues, but I think a crucial thing that you can come back to when you especially begin to think about scaling these values is to consider for whom is it valuable. So the scaling work offers guidance on horizontal, vertical, and functional scaling approaches, and we will come into this shortly. So you can say that dimensional scaling, to start off, what you already have been doing a lot, I would argue, is depth scaling. You have been deepening and expanding your knowledge, the knowledge of your colleagues, the knowledge of the participants that you've been working in your change project. So you deepen that knowledge, you're expanding that knowledge, those skills and those activities. Whether or not you are doing different kind of work, that's completely fine. It's just that you have been deepening that kind of practice and then taking it forward in your own and your colleagues' practices. So that connects into the depth. But I would argue by doing this, that you already done, you have created the conditions for other forms of scaling. So a first kind that maybe is quite common when we think about taking something onward and forward is horizontal scaling. That you're sharing an activity more widely, extending its reach, maybe including more colleagues, including people you have met in, for example, meetings, conferences, maybe during activities when you've done the change project, you might have encountered other people within your educational TVET colleges, and you said, they have been interested in what you're doing, and then you begin to maybe include them, or they maybe pick up some parts of what you have done in your change project and take that forward by themselves or in collaboration with you. So that's one way, this is the horizontal scaling. Another one is the functional scaling, which is slightly, it's related, but slightly different. And it's the adding a wider range of activities to enrich and or expand the current activity or set activities. So it's not just doing more of the same that you've already been doing with other people or other people picking up, but also you're taking it into new areas. You're really growing them, your change projects into new directions, you could say. So it's like a tree or something that is developing new branches. So that's the functional scaling that can, of course, have overlaps, as we will see later with some examples with the horizontal scaling. And then finally, in this part, we can talk about vertical scaling, and that's maybe what we often encounter in policy, in reports, and so on. And it's the idea that you do a pilot project and then you take it into a higher level of policy or a higher level of activities. You do it over the whole your whole institution or the whole educational system and so on. So you go into these policy systems, you go through policies. So that is often what we maybe are we're used to in terms of scaling. But I think it's crucial that we don't get ourselves limited to just think that we've managed to do scaling just if we managed to do that, pushing our ideas up to a policy systems level. So one way of just illustrating this is, if we start from the inner circle here, we have what I already talked about, at the bottom, the purple circles, you have the horizontal scaling going across, doing more of similar things. Maybe colleagues pick up your part or whole of your change project and do it in different areas within your institutions and so on. But it's also the functional scaling going into new activities. And then you have the vertical scaling, maybe up to a policy or whole educational or like institution level, or into the whole education level. But I think crucially, as I highlighted before, all these are dependent on and enabled by depth scaling. Depth scaling, again, just to remind you, is regarding how you develop within your change project your skills, your knowledge, your abilities to actually address the topics and the concerns that drove you into developing this change project from the beginning. And I think that is the depth scaling. But if you go to the outermost ring, I think an aspect that is important to remember when we're doing the scaling is also the temporal, that we want things to not just be successful now, but we want it to be sustainable over time, that we want to not have to do new projects all over again, but try to build on what we already achieved. Because I think crucially, you manage already to do a lot with your change project. So it's much more valuable to try to take them forward, to do the most of those energy, the commitment, the resources, and the interest that you all and your colleagues have invested in this change project. So the temporal scaling is this, that not just taking it to different places, but also make it sustainable over time, take it into the future. This, what do we do next? And I think that also connects to another question that we will come back to shortly. And that is, I can already now mention it, and it's that we can also, when we try to do scaling, begin to consider when is it a good timing. For example, is it other projects going on, or some efforts going on within your institution that you could connect or to your change project to, or get support with, or maybe that could also be a way of enabling these kind of horizontal scaling, vertical scaling, functional scaling. So as Sirka mentioned, your change projects are always, of course, going on within your institutions. So I think it's crucial then, when we're trying to do scaling of the values within your projects, change projects, to consider what is going on in these institutions, and can there be synergies between what you're doing in the change project and what is going on in the rest of the institution on different levels. So an example then, just to go a little bit more concrete, an example of functional scaling supported by depth. So functional scaling was this new activities and so on. So then we have an example from the previous year here. We have been doing this change project for years, but we have gained new insights through being involved in the project. So there's new insights, new knowledge development. You have a function, you have like a depth scaling going on there. The change project is a continuous change project. So there we have, you could also argue, there is a temporal aspect there. It's continuous, it's going on. It keeps on changing. And I think that's a crucial part also, that in order to actually achieve temporal scaling, we shouldn't be afraid of the change project to actually change over time. That we might understand the challenges we're trying to address, or the the situation that we are trying to achieve better over time. And as such, the change project will be changing. And there are various aspects of the change project. So storytelling, educational theory, e-learning, and there we see the functional scaling going into different areas of practice and different activities. So here is an example how a change project can, of course, often work on different directions or dimensions of scaling at the same time. And they are, as I mentioned previously, they are often interconnected, and especially depth scaling is a condition for pretty much all other forms of scaling. So your ability to do scaling starts with your practices and how you develop those practices and those abilities within the change project with your colleagues. Another example, just to give for about horizontal scaling, is that I have also taken it upon myself to organize a workshop to enlighten my colleagues at my institution and other sister institutions on the importance of sustainable development, and especially in graduates from TVET institutions. So here we have quite a straightforward horizontal scaling, in that it's both horizontal scaling within the institution, but also within sister institutions. And it goes to again, we see here underlying is this depth scaling, to be able to have a knowledge and by extension, maybe skills or abilities to also work with and address sustainable development. And finally, then the more traditional, maybe vertical scaling is this, because this pilot change project, the teacher and training department has come up with better organized and clear model for community service learning, which is intended to be rolled out to the whole college soon. So here we have a very clear example of a vertical scaling, of trying to then push this change project that has been considered successful in terms of better organized and clear model for community service learning, and then scaling it up vertically to the whole college. Of course, if you dig deeper into this case and the examples here for the change project, you will find different other kind of scaling. Especially you have, of course, already here the depth scaling and the better organized and clear models. It's regarding skills, abilities, knowledge about how to work with that. So depth scaling is always, I would argue, in the background of every other kind of scaling. And then just very concretely, what you can begin to think about based on this for your own project is, as Sirka talked about, that you are creating values on different levels throughout your change project. So what you can begin to think about when you want to now scale for impact your change project is, firstly, what impacts of the change project do you plan to scale? And this can be, for example, crucial that some values you have created can be easier to scale to certain other places and with certain other people, while some created values might be very successful in your institution or in your department, but may be very dependent on the specific conditions under which you enable to set up your change project. And it might work better in certain other institutions and less easily work out in other institutions. So that's why we want to have you think about these questions of what impacts of the change project do you plan to scale? Why should we scale these impacts? And I think it's crucial to think about the why question also. Again, coming back to, just because you can doesn't mean that you necessarily should always, that it's good to have the purpose clear for why you're doing it. And also consider who should be involved in the scaling process and the impacts of your change project. That can be that you choose strategically colleagues that you want to work with, or people who are in a position in places where they can, for example, enable functional or horizontal scaling in different ways. But it can also be that you consider coming back to this question of where and through which levels and areas within your institutions, but also beyond, should the change project be scaled. So that there you can also be strategic in terms of how does your change project evolve or expand over time. Do you want to go into, for example, another institution through horizontal scaling to then enable a functional scaling into new activities? So it can be like this planned process, and not just trying to do as much, but also be clear of why you're doing it towards different areas. And then when, coming back to this question of timing and synergies, that when should the program or parts of the program be introduced into new settings or with new people? So can you find synergies again with the other ongoing efforts or activities within and beyond your institutions? And then also, of course, ultimately, it's important to also consider which resources will be needed to scale the impact of your change project. And how can you build these into your institution's annually budgeting process? And I think this comes back that based on where you want to take your change project, when you want to do it, who you want to do it with, and how you want to do it, will affect what kind of resources you need. So you could also, instead of having a grand plan and just trying to find the resources afterwards, you can also look, okay, what kind of resources are available? What does that enable us to do? And then you also have those resources inform who you focus on, where you go, and also like the synergies, because you might not have available a lot of resources in certain areas, but you might be able to find synergies that can compensate for that, enable you to do much more than you would just being able to do by yourself in your project. So I think those kind of things can be very helpful for you in taking this forward, as we see in the picture, also trying to spread this from your own practices into a lot of like networks and tree and outgrowths throughout your project. So there is a lot of potential if you use these questions strategically in your scaling work of your change project and the values there. And I think that I just want to come back to this model very shortly. I think it connects back to this, that we need to then think about I think this picture in relation to the questions and the considerations I asked earlier. You can go back and look at these together, probably, to get yourself or support yourself in this strategic work that I think would enable you to do a lot with not necessarily a lot of resources to take your change project forward and scale them for impact. And I think, just to finish off my little part here, I think there is always already, through like previous examples of this SST, there is already achieved impacts through the scaling. That a significant depth scaling has already taken place within the scope of the types of value created for participants in the SST course. That includes both previous participants and previous iterations of the course, but also you have already achieved significant depth scaling, I would argue. And it's also indicative of the emergence of ESD practice in teacher education. So you're part of actually doing defining and working out how ESD practice is going to work in the teacher education. And it's also important to recognize this work within the institutions you work in and beyond. So while often, as I said, often emphasized in policy and reporting, vertical forms of scaling are not possible without other forms of scaling, such as horizontal, depth, and functional scaling. So it's not possible without the professional development, transformative learning that you've already worked with and continues to work with that allows for immediate and potential value, such as social and knowledge capital that Sirka already talked about. By this, I say thank you, and I will leave it over to Heila very shortly to talk about this final slide. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Martin and Sirka, for such a lovely presentation, so clear, and it's just beautiful to see, how we can create value for ourselves and for others through being part of a project like this. And what I wanted to show us now was how we are thinking of working on building evaluation indicators for SDG 4.7 from this work, which can be used then hopefully by our policymakers, national governments, and so on, as they go forward with the ESD 2030 agenda and the monitoring and evaluation reporting that our governments need to do, because our governments all have to report on SDG 4. And if they have good indicators for SDG 4.7, then we can get some good reports on, what is going on in Africa, instead of always getting these reports that look as if nothing is going on here. So it's up to us to show that we are doing things, and that what we are doing is producing value. What we are doing is addressing the SDGs. What we are doing is addressing the ESD 2030 agenda. And of course, to do that, we need to make it visible. So what we've been doing with the 2019 and the 2020 course is we've been capturing now these types of value that are being created by all of the change projects and the participants in the change projects. And what we are doing then, as Sirka showed you with the table there, we're capturing that value for each of the change projects so that we've got that as a data set. Then secondly, we are then looking at that and identifying what kinds of scaling is coming from that, as Martin has showed you in the examples that he showed. And then we also, at the beginning of this project, you will remember your regional reference group members did a big work, which was to undertake an environmental scan in each country to, inform us of what was or what was not happening in terms of ESD in the countries. So we have the environmental scans, we have the value creation data from the change projects, and we have now data and insight onto the scaling. So if you look at this bottom level of this diagram, you see what we're trying to do is to build a monitoring and evaluation system that involves engagements between the bottom-up practice or our enactments of ESD in our change projects, in our institutions, in our communities, and the sort of top-down framings of monitoring and evaluation indicators for SDG 4, which when you look at them coming from the global level, they're very broad, and one can't really see what exactly needs to be monitored. So we need more refined indicators that sit between this sort of level 2 here and this 0.5 here at the bottom of our story, you see. So the bottom of our story here, which is actually, the foundation, I would say, of all of this, is the value creation via the change projects and our institutional change projects. And there's many different kinds of those. If you look at each other, hear from each other, see the change projects, we have different kinds of change projects, and we really want different kinds of change projects because we learn more from diversity than from homogeneity. So we want to see the value that is created across TVET, early childhood education, primary, secondary, etc., etc. Okay. Then what we are going to do with that data is we're going to take it and look at it at another level. This point number 4 here, you see, change projects as responses to gaps in ESD, in teacher, TVET, education policy and praxis. So that's the environmental scan. And we'll then compare the data from the change project to the data in the environmental scan, and then we'll be able to see how these change projects are filling the gaps, because all of you are addressing policy issues in your change project. In Learning Action 1, we ask you to look at the curriculum policy policy in the country and identify, how your change project is going to help to address these gaps. So we'll then be able to see what is occurring there and also how it's occurring through the scaling process, you see. Then what we'll be able to do from there is we'll be able to develop, I think, some very useful indicators for ESD, which will help us to speak to our national policy intentions and also institutional alignment, and be able to see what is there, but also what is still not yet there. In other words, where we need to continue with change process work as we go forward. And then this can help to inform sustainable development policy at a national level, especially the reporting here. You can see the little red box on SDG 4 and 4.7. And what is important about this diagram is that these things relate to each other. And there is what here you can see on the side here, relations of emergence. So it's very interesting that we get global, indicators, targets, and so on, but we don't get enough insight into how to make those targets be realized in practice. So our project here is a project to realize targets in practice and then to be able to report on what is coming out, what value is being created, what is being scaled, how does it address gaps, and what does that then mean for ongoing monitoring and evaluation. So one of the objectives of this program is to develop tools, monitoring tools for SDG 4.7. So this is what we're doing here. And it's really important that we ask you to contribute as you develop your change project. So I saw a very good question in the Q&A just now from Job Stephen Kayamogi from Eswatini. And he said, yes, most of these questions that we've been listening to this morning will make sense towards April 2022. And he said, exclamation mark. And this is because we are only just consolidating our change projects. And then I responded and I said, hi, Job, yes. But it is useful to have them in mind as you build the change project, because you can then see what kind of value is being created for you and for others as you go along. And we will, in April 2022, before our policy dialogue and before we have our next graduation, we'll be asking everyone to fill in a value creation form, and we'll ask you to reflect on the scaling work that you've been doing or that you can do. So it's really good for you to know about it now. That's why we're having this week of webinars, you see, and to hold it in mind as you go along. And thank you very much for raising this very good point. So I wanted to just, come back to Job's question here and to give you a sense of, this is a work in progress. It's a process that we are all working on together. So when you get the value creation forms that we will ask you to fill in, it is because we're trying to develop this understanding to inform our national processes for better quality monitoring and evaluation indicators. I see Ludwig is on the platform here with us. And one of the things we've been talking about is that we really don't have good indicators for monitoring and evaluation in Africa. And then what happens is every time that you see a report on Africa, it says there's nothing going on in Africa. And it makes me so cross because there is so much going on in Africa. And it's really our job to make it more visible. So this is what this big effort is about. It's about putting indicators into our national systems that can be used, that can show what we are doing, and not leave us on the global stage looking as if there's nothing going on, when in fact ESD is one of the strongest places in the world, the ESD practice in Southern Africa and in many parts of Africa. So let's make ourselves visible, let's show up what we are doing, and let's contribute to the story together. So that was our session this morning, Charles. I know that you were also aiming to look at a monitoring and evaluation working group. So if there are participants here that are very excited and interested in this work on monitoring and evaluation, I think you can just, put your name in the chat and Charles can contact you as we go forward with building our monitoring and evaluation working group. We already have some names from the last time we had this discussion. And I think we need to start working now with a bit more vigor because we have 2 years of data now. And we're also going to go into a monitoring and evaluation process of the SST program coming up soon. So I think we want to bring all of this together so that we can, consolidate what is coming through. So that's it from my side, I think. Charles, I don't know if you want to add, or Patience wants to add, or Ludwig wants to add, just to introduce Ludwig. Is Ludwig there, Martin? I can see he's sitting behind your name.
Yes, I'm here. I entered through Martin's customized link.
Yes, okay, great. So Martin, Ludwig, maybe you want to just quickly tell us the work that you're doing in Mecca and the African Hub for Climate Change, because we're doing the same kind of work there, trying to develop monitoring and evaluation indicators. Just very briefly so that people know about that as well.
Okay, so the Maker project, this is an international project that involves universities and agencies across the world. So at Rhodes University, we are holding the position as the coordination team for the Africa Maker regional hub. So what the regional hub is doing is that it seeks to get case studies from practitioners, researchers, and organizations that work on climate change education. So in the coming weeks, we'll send out a call for proposals where you have to share with us your proposal, what you intend to research on, what you intend to write on, the case studies that you intend to conduct. And then we will select the successful case studies. We'll only take 5 from Africa. So far, we've got about 150 people and organizations that have registered to be part of this regional hub. And when the call goes out, we will select 5 successful case studies that will get a funding of 10,000 Canadian dollars. But for those who may not be successful, we'll keep the regional hub intact, and it will be a very good space for networking. We had Seka and Martin emphasizing the importance of networking, learning, and as a potential value. So this network will serve a lot of potential in terms of access to resources, access to new information and developments across the world, or new opportunities. So we'll send out the call, and then we will also ask if you could include your names when you send out the call, so that you can also review it and see how you can sort of come on board if you have the time, and if the call falls within your interests and your areas of specialty. Yes, so yeah, look out for that. We'll send it out in the coming days.
Thanks, Martin. And just, yeah, I mean, sorry, Martin, Ludwig. Martin, Ludwig. Ludwig, yeah? Do you want to add? Sorry.
Yeah, on the regional hub, I think that's all. I can't get deep into the knowledge synthesis. I think that will be another big topic.
Okay, good. Yes, so just for everybody to know that there is this call out now, so we'll communicate and send that to all of the clusters as well, the regional clusters, all of the countries, because there's a call there for 5 projects. And as Martin said, these are focused on climate change education. So if you do want to, put in an application for that. And we'll also link you to the Africa Hub for those of you that are interested in climate change education, which is very closely linked to ESD as well. So yeah, so that's coming up. But then we also, in that same project, also looking at issues of indicator development for ESD, and climate change education. Patience, did you want to add anything, or Charles?
Patience?
Can you hear me? Sorry.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you very much. I've listened with rapt attention, and I'm really very pleased with the way the webinar has progressed. And I'm happy to know that at least the climax, which is this establishment of a working group, I will call it, on this indicator, will be a very helpful way forward, so that we will not just be doing many things in the Southern Africa, and there will be no form of documentation or any form of being able to trace how we have progressed. And if it is also possible for us, for the group to be established across to be represented by all countries, including those that have already taken part in the course, that is the 2019 and 2020 participants, that will also be very helpful so that it will benefit everyone. And even those who are yet to take can also be part of it and begin to think and anticipate what these measures should be. We want to be able to showcase what Southern Africa is up to and what we have created, and we ourselves be able to appreciate where we have, how we have progressed, where we started from, and where we are now, and where we are moving forward to. Because with the ESD for 2030 National Working Group, we have planned, our activity on ESD till 2030. And with these indicators, we'll be able to know how we can measure this progress. And so it's really a good development, and I hope people will show interest, and we'll be able to move forward in a very systematic way and be able to showcase our achievements with evidences. Over. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Patience. I don't have much to add myself. I want to quickly check from the floor. Anyone with a question, contribution, comment? I don't see any hand up. Yeah, there are two hands. Very quickly, Preven, can you help me to promote Zachariah and Khadija?
They've been promoted, Charles. They should be able to speak
So,
now.
Zachariah, go ahead. Francis. Just unmute yourself and talk. Can't see. Has he lowered his hand?
Charles?
Hello?
Charles? Yeah,
Hello?
can you hear me, Charles?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly, introduce our colleague Ushio, who will also be joining us in the office, to add to the human resource. She is coming in also to join the workforce in the absence of Julia. And she has also long years of work in education for sustainable development in our regional office in Bangkok, in the UNESCO regional office in Bangkok. And she'll be spending a few months with us. And I don't know if she's able to speak. She could also say one or two words when others have spoken.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, there she is.
Hello. Thank you so much, Patience, for giving me this a chance to say a few words. And I just wanted to show my face and just share with you what I look like. My name is Ushio Mira, and that's just Patience kind of introduced me to. And I'm still in Bangkok, and I'm planning to travel to Harare in about 10 days. And I'm very much looking forward to going there and working with all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ushio. Over to you,
Thanks,
Charles.
Yes, thank you, Ushio. Thanks, Patience, for reminding me that. Thank you very much. We shared the link, Zandi shared the link yesterday, and thanks very much for reminding us to introduce here. Welcome, Ushio. And Zachariah, have you disappeared? No more hands up. Colleagues, there are no questions. Anything on the chat? Preven? No? In terms of questions?
Charles, no, I think there are a couple of people that are indicating interest in being part of the monitoring and evaluation group. So I've asked Sandy just to take note of their names so that we don't lose that interest.
Okay.
And yes, otherwise, I think we are probably set for today. And just to say a big thank you to Sirka and Martin. Such an excellent presentation from the two of you. It was so clear and beautifully done. Thank you very, very much.
Good. Thank you so much, colleagues. I think let's call it a day. We'll meet you tomorrow, same time. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Charles, can you just stay on for a second
Okay.
when we finish, once the meeting is closed?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Hayla. Thank you, Tika. Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Martin. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you, Patience. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Oh, I'll just call you on a WhatsApp to take the time to get to end.
Sorry, Hayla.
I'll call you on a WhatsApp because it's taking a bit of time to close off the meeting.
All right, fine. Thank
Okay.
you.
Cool. Bye. Okay, Zandy, you can probably end the meeting. Thanks,
Thanks,
everybody.
Sandy.
Please.